Alrighty, so sound seems to be working okay. Lights and colors are up. Everything seems to be going good. Alrighty, welcome to Nikos RPG. I'm Jonathan Alvin. Actually, this is actually It's Okay to Play. The network. The show today is Making Believe. And I'm being really professional here in this first bit because I've had a bit of an awakening this week. We had a very wonderful event down in Los Angeles. Went to a very good friend of mine by the name of Craig Duswalt had an event, and I went down and got to hang out and talk to a lot of people. And we are now embarking on this new adventure, and we've kind of codified things, and so I will be on the air every day this week, twice a day, roughly noon until 2 o'clock, or from 10 until noon during the day, and then I'll also be back in the evenings to run a game in the evening. So right this second I'm fiddling with my page here. Just a second. Haven't played with this in a while, so refreshing things here. And that's got me on the dashboard. That's why I'm trying to get off the dashboard. Well, fun. I'm showing such great professionalism here, I'm sure. I want to get off the dashboard and get back to my screen, and it won't let me do it. Why is it doing that? He's wanting me to do management right here. Alright. Alrighty. So, having played with all of the buttons and whistles, I can get on to our program today. As many of you may know, we're on the veritable edge of launching the Nikos RPG tabletop game, roleplay game, and it's at the printers right now, so to speak, for the first few protocopies. I have my first one here, and I'll be talking to retailers starting with it today, and we'll be going forward with that. But today in particular, we want to talk about the coming season for Imagination Rejuvenation through the Making Believe label, as well as the whole raft of shows we're going to be doing. So to start this off, I want to go ahead and go over the schedule of shows we're going to be doing. I've got to turn to my trusty dusty paper schedule here. Craig Duswalt talked with Susan and several other people during the event about wanting to move to electronic calendars and such, and I have one up now. There's a Google Calendar that has all of the scheduled shows going on ad infinitum from this point. But on a quick rundown, and before we get going, I do need to stop and acknowledge that we do have a sponsor, Board Games Paradise, the retail store in Redlands, California, a one-stop location for all of the possible board game, card game, miniatures games you may be interested in. Board Games Paradise is on State Street in downtown Redlands, and it's run by a very near and dear friend of mine named Rich Matney, and he and his wife Tracy are just a great couple, and they run a tight little ship there. And if you are interested in seeing our our play sessions, or becoming part of it, we do play Monday nights at 6 p.m. So tonight I'll be over there at the store. So our schedule going forward, again in the midday time frame, either 10 until noon or noon until 2. We're going to be doing the following shows. We're going to be doing Making Believe, which is this format. There's a bunch of different things that will be showing up in this kind of a show. I'll go over those in a minute. On Tuesdays, of course, we will still be doing Night Ghost News Days. Wednesdays will be our our feature, It's Okay to Play, which focuses on the very idea that this channel is dedicated to, and that is the concept of interviews with families that play together, conversations about how play affects the mind and things like that. And Thursday will be Creative Differences, and this is going to be a new show. I'm going to be literally going on to Twitch's other channels and viewing other games groups in play and interacting with them, kind of like a player reacts as I review and talk about the games that they're running. And then I will be doing interview shows as well with other creators like myself on the platform. On Fridays, I'm going to be beginning the Games Mastery Series live episodes, and these will be leading to the eventual release of the Games Mastery second season. The first season is available at games.official.academy if you want to go check that out at some point. I don't do it yet. Oh, and by the way, thank you for being a viewer with me. And if you would, go ahead and click the follow button so you never miss an episode, and also click on this episode if you like it as well. And also look at our patreon.com website if you want to become a part of the activity that we're doing here. Saturdays will be my Above the Board series, and this is where I'll be talking to industry and non-industry professionals about how we can utilize the skills that we develop in gameplay and whatnot to expand the effectiveness of our jobs. And then Sunday is just going to be a completely fun afternoon. Every week I'll be doing Commander Clueless Drives a Tank episodes of World of Tanks, and possibly other games if I can get that going. But I wanted to spend some time going over this series and going a little bit further into it, and in particular into the agenda for the Making Believe episodes. Just a second here. There we go. Finally getting my act together here. Alrighty. So, anyway, so we're going to be talking about the series for this year. The episodes of Making Believe are going to be focused on a set conversation about the very concepts of belief, imagination, creativity, the way the mind works, and things like that. And this first episode, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Those of you that have viewed my channel before or know much about me, I am Jonathan Albin. I've been a professional games master and storyteller in role-play fantasy games and indeed any form of tabletop games over the last 48 years. And that's a long time to be doing anything, and so you tend to get to know the material fairly well just simply by doing it. My passion for games comes from my childhood when we would go and visit relatives' houses when I was a kid. When we went on vacation, that's what we did, is travel to other people's homes. And inevitably, we broke out card tables and began playing card games and board games and such. And generally, they were of the a less crunchy version in that we weren't gathering together specifically to play games, but we were getting together to communicate, and the gameplay was the mechanism by which we did that interconnection. In my life and career, I've been doing, well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. In my life and career, I've had many different jobs. I jokingly say I've had more careers than most people have had individual jobs. I've been an air traffic controller and a microwave antenna installer and a cellular technician and I owned a landscaping business and a window washing business and a bunch of other entrepreneurial kind of things along the way. And the entire time I was doing all those other things, I was involved with gaming to the tune of at least one session per week for all of that time. So not only have I got a pretty good handle on the game and how the dynamics work, I also have pretty good insight on what are the merits of gameplay and such. So all of that led me to an understanding of how we conceive and understand and interact with each other in our mental state, and also to consider rather extensively how we imagine and what we are doing when we are imagining. And I came upon the realization that one of the keys to maintaining youthfulness is to remain in a place where your emotional state and everything can be plastic or malleable. Not necessarily plastic, but the concept of plasticity is that it can adapt and change to environments. And so the more we remain active in our imaginative state, the more we can stay ahead of concepts like creativity. And so over the next I believe this is a 6-month thing here. Let's see. It's a long time. It'll take us from now. Where's my schedule? I got the wrong one. I got the daily. There we go. Again, I hope you're enjoying my professionalism, because I clearly have done this a lot. No, I have the dailies here. No, there's the monthly. So from now until April, so I guess that's a 6-month run, we have a lot of activities to go through. So when we speak of the idea of creating an imagination nation, a place where our brains are interacting in both the tangible, active environment that we live in called the present, as well as in the projected and anticipated and desired existence that is the future, we have to kind of come to a place where the two minds can communicate. I've recently been doing a lot of personal research on the concepts of what is known as quantum theory, the idea that we when an action occurs, that action's occurrence has, rather reversed, ramifications of observing an action cause it to change. And so when we project our minds forward and we imagine what we're looking at in the future, it is in effect starting that observation process before we are actually able to see it. But because we are beings who can grasp concepts and visualize and experience emotionally and in all other sensory ways things that are not present but are rather things that are in the future, we are basically creating an observational loop whereby we can adjust and change our actions to put us into the kind of future that we want. What this therefore means is that we have to develop an understanding of how our imagination works, how our mind works, and how that imagination interacts with our emotional state and our physical state, and find ways to connect those two to the practical activities of our life to bring them to fruition. So I'm just going to be kind of going over the course of the schedule here in this introductory episode to show kind of where the pathway will go. And as we go through, there will be times when we will have guests on the show who will be providing information in ancillary nature to this, or perhaps enhancing and envisioning of one of these pieces or whatever. But the first thing to look at is that we have to look at an evaluation process. How can we evaluate our imagination? If you ask anybody on the street, do you consider yourself to be an imaginative person? More often than not, you'll get a yes. You'll get someone that, even if they have to roll their eyes to try to figure out whether they are or they aren't, the idea is that we all as humans know that is a part of who we are. That imagination is a part of us. And as time goes by, how much of that imagination stays active in our life compared to becoming just something that was in our childhood or in our youth, the idea is that we, of course, always feel that we have a good imagination, or at least have an imagination. So we're going to be looking at, in next week's episode, we're going to be looking at ways to evaluate our imagination, what kind of little tricks and tips and techniques we can develop to evaluate our imaginative state. And I want to share this with you for several different reasons. Number one reason for wanting to be able to evaluate is to be able to quantify results. Obviously, if we say we're going to improve something, but we have no way of measuring its present success versus its future evaluation values, it's difficult to measure. So we want to create these methods for evaluating imagination so that we can compare, apples to apples. A second reason to want to do an evaluation is quite often we need to have a baseline. We need to have a framework to work from. And if we assume a modicum value of, say, A, but then we actually find that we are operating at some place closer to B, then we have to realize that there's a way to move up to a level of C or D over time, and to be able to find ways to quantify that, we have to first have the baseline. And the third reason to have an evaluation of your imagination is to realize how focused it is. When a person is a speaker and they don't enunciate their words very clearly, their focus, their verbal focus, is going to fail because the viewer or the hearer won't be able to comprehend or accept it. Likewise, a person who has, and like in my case, I have to wear glasses. Why? Because my eyes don't focus the same up here as it does farther out and such. And so glasses are a way to moderate and focus that attention to make it so that we can get to clarity. And then finally, if we are going to be public speakers or presenters, if we have those verbal glitches, we're going to have problems with communication. But more importantly, if our mind is not clear, then the ideas won't come to our lips very clearly either. So we have to have a way to measure our mental acuity, and imagination is one facet of that. And pardon me, I've got some kind of allergy thing going on. My eyes are bugging me. For the next week beyond that, we're going to be doing an episode dealing with the capacities of imagination. In other words, what is the expanse that our imagination can take us? Certainly, when we were children, we delved into that considerably more because our minds weren't fully developed to tell us what the limits were in reality. So therefore, there were no limits there. We only had the limits of what our imagination was. And as we go through this episode in 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at our capacity. What is it we can imagine? How big can we imagine, and how clearly can we make that image visceral and recognizable? The third episode in this series will be dealing with actually fourth now because the intro is this one. The fourth episode will be dealing with what is the difference between a capacity and a limitation, because we can have our mind could go completely, off the rails in terms of what you could be thinking about, but how practical and useful is that? The limits are things that we control. The capacities are the natural boundaries that are beyond that. So, yes, we can imagine perhaps infinite things, but we can only concentrate on and make sense of a limited amount within that. So that episode will deal with those limitations, how to set our limitations, determine our boundaries, and that kind of thing. By the way, if you're watching and you feel any time you want to comment, please feel free to leave a message in the chat. If you are from someplace other than California, do mention what locale you are in. You don't have to give me an address per se, but letting me know whether you're East Coast or Midwest or Asia. Since I know the internet does go way beyond the boundaries, definitely leave me a message to that effect so I know where you're from. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask, especially at the low rate volume of contact at this point. I'll be glad to communicate with you. When we get up and running and really going fast, I'll have a moderator that'll help me determine that kind of stuff. But for right now, as Count Rugen says, we will work with what we have. The episode belonging to that, the fifth episode, would be to expand frontiers. And the reality is all of us have our personal preferences, our comfort zones, and those areas that are that we're willing to allow our imagination to run into. And until we know where we can go through the capacities and limitations, then we can't possibly set where the boundaries of our frontiers would be, the place where we want to expand. And so we're wanting to be looking at how we can expand those imagination frontiers and new areas to conquer and develop. The following week after that, we are a sixth week of this series. I'm going to be introducing the concept of role-play roulette. We'll actually be attempting to, when we have some established viewers, to actually play a role-play scenario through the chat. So persons in the communications channel known as the chat will be able to provide information to me during the game, and we will tell a story between us collectively, explaining and expounding on that possibility or that realm of fantasy play. And when I say role-play roulette, it's a particular style of role-play that I devised a couple of years ago for the express purpose of being able to do short burst storytelling without all of the burdensome nature of roleplay mechanisms as a whole. That's what's throwing me off. I see what's throwing me off. Okay. That's what's throwing me off altogether. Okay. Because I'm not looking at my normal mechanism, I'm looking at a secondary mechanism that was confusing me. Alrighty, so that's fun. That's real fun. There we go. So, the roleplay roulette, therefore, has a rotisserie, quite frankly, a roulette wheel, segmented into 20 different segments at this point, potentially even more in the future. But we will spin the spinner, so to speak, and it will pick a genre, a story theme snippet, and then from that we will build. I, as a storyteller, will build a story, and you will, you as viewers and participants, will pick up on different roles. And then, as we go through the story, you'll interact with what you believe that the characters in the role should be doing, and we will in turn be building the roleplay game together. Now, that is so weird. That is so weird. Where are we? Am I not recording out into the ether? Oh, I am. That's just so bizarre. Alrighty. So after that first block, the first 6, then we have the roleplay roulette and that. Then we're going to start moving into the idea of utilizing imagination to enhance creativity. So we're going to talk about jump-starting creativity. And in that episode, I think you're going to find a lot of really useful information about what sparks creative flow. What is it that turns on the mental factory that is our intellect and our imagination? Following week, we'll talk about defining the differences between fantasy, fiction, and futurism, because they are all 3 separate facets of the creative mind. And we want to delve into the efficacy of each and what they collectively can add to our own creativity and our own ability to spontaneously generate new ideas and perhaps even more succinctly clarify the multiple concepts that we have access to already and converting them into our own messaging and our own realms, if you will. From that, we're going to go into the next episode. We'll be dealing with the priming of the imagination engine. How do we stabilize the creative pulse? Because as an author, I've written 350 books in the last 10 years, and in the creativity process, there are those who ponder on the places where they stop in that creativity, and they refer to it as horrible things like writer's block or mental paralysis, analysis paralysis, and these kind of terms. The way I prefer to look at it is that the intellect engine, the power in our mind to create new, is there and ready all the time, but we sometimes feed it too much information and it stalls out and it founders in too many variables, or we underfeed it. We don't provide enough fodder, enough new information, enough permissions for it to actually turn over, so to speak, and we kind of stall it out and starve it out. And so by priming this imagination pump and learning how to monitor and adapt our activities to give it the information, the fuel and the information it needs to keep operational. This jumpstart process will set us up for long-term productivity that we haven't even really considered. Beyond that, we're going to be looking also at the difference between visualization and envisioning. There are people out there that would say the kind of concepts that I'm developing are visionary. I prefer to look at it as the standpoint of being a visionist, someone who takes the vision I have of the future, monitor and control it down to the point where it's not wild dreams that I'm able to project that then later become true, which makes it visionary, but instead a matter of stating the things that need to be accomplished with the context of how we can accomplish it, so that the future soon is the present and we can move on to yet another future beyond that. This means we have to change the way we literally go through the visualization process, and I'm a big advocate for visualization, but I believe that envisioning, or bringing it to the internal level and allowing all the other emotions and senses to be a part of the process, will make it more effective, and has certainly for the people and myself that I've worked with. Next, after that, will be stopping sensory deprivation. We sometimes, the old phrase my grandfather used to say is, you don't want to color for your nose to spite your face, and yet the idea that we would remove from the equation senses other than our eyes for validation is exactly the problem that many have. And so we have to enhance our visualization and stop locking out the other sensory states, and instead embrace them and figure out ways to incorporate them into our envisioning processes. The next beyond that would be awakening curiosity, and this is curiosity, in my estimation, is probably the most powerful mechanism we have for change, because it's only when we question what we have that we start looking for something beyond. So this concept of awakening curiosity is really about expanding the framework upon which we make decisions. And in some ways, this is maybe one of the scarier blocks, because you're actually talking about opening yourself up to alternative concepts and different ideas than you normally would be embracing. That would round out the second of the sections. So we would have another role-play roulette session. And theoretically, while it would be a random roll, it may be also fascinating to stay in the same venue to see how much a person's creativity has been expanded by just the very concept we've covered over this last block. Again, it'll just be a single game session. It'll be run through Twitch, and it'll just be providing text responses and narrative on my part. So as we go into the third one, we're going to start looking at the restructuring of the very concept of games as a paradigm. Most people have certain perceptions about what they think games are, or what the term games mean. And in order to utilize game theories and game mechanics in my teaching process, I have to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So we'll be restructuring the game's paradigm. The week after that will be kind of a reversal. It'll be set up to be an Ask Me Anything kind of a session, where you can provide information to me on what you would like to know about myself, the process, how we got here, and that kind of thing. And it'll be more of a discussion framework. Now, I want to stop at this point, and again, thank you for watching so far. As I mentioned, our sponsor is Board Games Paradise. Their logo is this little jobber-do in the corner of my page down there. And not pointing in front of the camera. That's very interesting. I thought it was that camera. No, down there. See if that works. It's over here. It's over here. All right. So, in addition to that, I want to make sure you know that you can get more information on what we're doing. Take a look at my personal projects through my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Nycos, Nycos. And I'll put up a link after this on this episode so you can find it as well. And the concept here is that role play is my particular passion, but the very concept of the Nycos RPG is actually an enhancement and an improvement on the role play environment as a whole. All right, going back, our third episode in that third quarter would be actually a quarterly review, and it's not really a quarterly review, it's like a halfway review, looking at what we've already covered, kind of going over the same topics. There may or may not be a test that week. Okay, there probably won't be, but I just make the joke. It's also going to be setting up the idea of beyond the sphere technologies, the idea of getting beyond the expected and usual, and utilizing your new imaginative boundaries and mechanisms. The following week will be an actual testing of the imagination engines that you've developed. It will be an open-ended Q&A kind of a format where I want to kind of get some feedback from you on what you've gotten from the episodes so far, what you would like to, how you can see it working in your life directly, and that kind of thing. And then the following week we're going to do a case history of the imaginative. I've got quite an array of people that I have quotes from and information from concerning their imagination life, and I'll be utilizing that to make some assessments on the projected efficacy of learning these imaginative processes for your own case. The following week we're going to talk about entering playgrounds, and this is the very idea of play without boundaries, without limitations, without without breaching the capacities that you have for imagination. This is in order to prepare ourselves for the last of the quarters, which will be coming up in a couple of sessions. From this, we want to be ready to unleash ourselves to work on the projects of our own going forward. We want to find out what it is you want to achieve and help you to reach those objectives through improved and enhanced imagination. Finally, we're going to do a stress test of the process. We're going to take one object or one project that we've been collectively discussing that we want to focus on, and kind of chainstorm the way to resolve that. And I'll go into chainstorming like that on the process as we get there. Just realize that more than just writing down a list of all the potential ideas that one might pursue, we're going to look at the causes and effects that go into the developing of a plan to achieve an objective. Then the following week, we're going to talk about the imagination unbound. When we finally decide to actually activate and put our weight, if you will, on our imaginative framework, it's the idea that we have to define the things that are immediate, the things that are urgent, the things that are important, and kind of qualify and clarify where those items should go in the frame, so that when we launch, we are on trajectory and have ways to checksum our progress. Then, this is about our 20th session, we'll be looking at the processing, learning how to process quantum existence. Remember, I started this by talking a little bit about quantum theory and the idea that we can look at a single project and have multiple outcomes and be able to watch and observe each of those outcomes for the variances between them. By living in a quantum world where we live in the present and we reach to our past, these two pieces have gone together forever, and we've operated always in a linear path using the primary positioning we are in as the forwardmost point on that theory, and then reaching into our past for an aft position to course correct as if we're sitting in the back of the boat and using a rudder. In this case, what we're talking about is moving to a position or a different framework where we are considering not only where we are now, but where we want to go in the future and where we were in the past to create a trajectory. And by having that trajectory, we can adjust our knowledge of the past to give us a better fine-tuning of where we're going in the future. But if we don't have eyes on the future, we're actually shorting ourselves on efficacy. So this process, therefore, will be to allow us to recognize where we are in our quantum state and learn to shift between that forwardmost point, which might be 5 years, 10 years, 12 years in the future, and live momentarily in that space, knowing and seeing and experiencing what that's going to feel like, so that when we come back to the present, when we shift back to the more practical positioning of where time is for us in this reality, then we can make those adjustments because we've already been there and kind of been able to more directly chart the course. After that is the idea of living within the future frame. There are many times that we say we want something and we would like to have it someday, and yet since we're always living in the present, that someday is always before us and we never accomplish it. So we have to learn to actually live somehow in that framework of the future, so that the events of today will catch up with us, if you will, and leave us living in that place that we are attempting to achieve. After that, we'll talk a little bit about the more esoteric aspects of this, the concept of simile, metaphor, allegory, and how these mechanisms of thought can help drive our creativity towards community. Because if we're operating in this future realm, we're living in a place that we aren't yet, among people that we are not yet among, and yet we can draw them to ourselves by being aware of where those people are in their present today. So it allows us to expand not only our concepts of the future, but our abilities to engage with the future. Then finally, as we finish out the season, we will have a second quarterly review, which will be going over the events of that last 3 months. And this may be a very intense event because we're going to be actually kind of doing a proof text against what we said we were going to accomplish at the end of the first quarter, and see how much we've progressed by the end of the second quarter. And I think in some ways that empowers this process a little bit more than some of the others that are out there, because this allows you to, in a short period of time, be able to see even the smallest successes, and in seeing the successes, the potential for great success and how the two are associated. And then finally, we're going to have a recap or season finale. And when we do the season finale, it will be going over all of these items, but it'll also be setting for ourselves, and maybe even for us as a collective, where we're going to be in the next 5 years, and creating that futurist position that we all can share in, so that we can all visualize and internalize into that, so that we can progress towards that collective objective. Oh, I like that, the collective objective. That's very good. You think I should come up with that or something. So, anyway, we are at about 45 minutes. I intended the show to go about an hour. We haven't had any direct communication in the chat, so I've been pretty much burning through my material, so it kind of makes sense we get a little bit early. I do apologize for the scratchy issues, but as I said earlier, I've got a bit of an allergy thing going on. No big deal. If you want to come and play with us, we are playing at Board Game Paradise tonight at 6 p.m. The logo down at the bottom is their logo, Board Game Paradise. They're on Redlands Boulevard. I'm sorry, they're on State Street in Redlands, downtown Redlands. You literally can't miss them. They're pretty much in the center of the second block. And they've got big signs out front, and right next to the there's a little stage area in the center of town. So, Board Game Paradise, I'll be there at 6 p.m. We run a game until about 10 p.m. I would love it if we would just one day just slam the place and have everybody that's watching all come together and kind of have like a mini fest there. But this is my first episode in the new realm, so I'm not expecting it anytime future at this point. So I want to thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your watching. Make sure that you hit the follow